This is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. On today's program, we're going to talk about Big Brother, social media, and social control. Specifically, reports coming in that numerous social media companies or big tech companies are actively censoring news information, search engines, the contents of social media pages, and that they have a very eminent bias, that they're biased against certain points of view, certain belief systems. For example, there have been reports that major search engine companies, the way they're created, they're biased against conservative ideas, Christian ideas, and they're supposedly in the promotion, or whatever you want to term it, in promotion of liberal, humanistic, socialist values. So to put it bluntly, some of these social media companies, search engines in specific, but others, are in the business of rigging the flow of information. And this is something I've observed personally, firsthand, especially in the last 2 years. So in today's edition of the Paul McGuire Report, we're going to investigate that. We're going to look at it because this affects profoundly the direction our society and our nation is going. Number two is it has the power to shape and alter our society in ways that it's very difficult for some people to imagine. Think of the internet as kind of a living consciousness, an electronic living consciousness, except instead of having like neurological pathways like the human brain has, you have circuits, you have memory storage units, you have the transfer of information, you have the storage of information. And our society, especially America, which supposedly is a free society, you have hundreds of millions of people in the United States in terms of population. In nations like China, you have an excess of over 1 billion people, and then you have billions of people on planet Earth. Now, all these people make all kinds of decisions, philosophical decisions, buying decisions, money decisions, religious decisions, all kinds of decisions, all kinds of behaviors, all kinds of beliefs. And the aggregate, the accumulation of numbers of people moving in this direction or that direction shapes and redirects society. So, for example, you will see in the United States of America, especially, well, this has been going on for quite a while, but especially in the last year, you're seeing very overt promotion, promoting the idea that America is now officially a socialist nation, with major magazine covers that ask questions like, have we become socialists, or is America socialist? Now, that's not an honest question. That's not an innocent question. That's a question that employs the psychological technique known as predictive programming, where you raise a question or you depict a future scenario, like in a science fiction movie or a science fiction novel or film. And as you depict this futuristic society, people have the idea that, wow, this movie or book is warning people of the danger of such a society, like in the dystopian science fiction novels, 1984 and Brave New World. But in actuality, the real purpose of those books, those novels, which were turned into television programs and feature films, was to employ a scientific term called predictive programming. The idea is the prediction you're making under the guise of creating a fictional story is actually a psychological mechanism designed to subconsciously persuade people and to subconsciously get people to accept as inevitable certain forms of society. For example, 1984, which was written by George Orwell, was far more than just a warning against the big brother government and mass surveillance, etc. Brave New World was far more than just a warning about a futuristic genetic mind control dictatorship. Both of those novels, among the hidden agendas that existed in those novels, was to embed in the subconscious minds of the readers the idea that get used to it, accept it. This is where society is going to be. There's nothing you can do to stop it, so you might as well just get used to it. They were trying to prepare the subconscious mind to accept a new kind of society, one in which you would always be spied on by electronic technology, and that your thoughts and your freedoms would be curtailed and controlled. That's what predictive programming is all about. Now, we live in a time that technology is accelerated, specifically technologies that some people have no idea even exist, and technologies that people do know exist. So, for example, the entire internet, social media, communications technology, whether it's mainstream media or search engines or Facebooks or YouTubes or whatever you want to call it, these new technological toys or communications devices are shaping our culture. They're shaping the consciousness of the people in the culture. They're shaping neurologically the young minds of children who no longer read as kids. They spend their time playing with social media. They have their cell phone out or a laptop out, and they spend 8 hours a day engaged in interacting with their friends on social media. This has a direct impact neurologically on the formation of their brains and how their brains actually work. And the world that it is creating is not some kind of spontaneous, accidental world. It's a planned world. And one of the ways in which the planners of this planned world are able to succeed in driving society as a whole to achieve its vision of the future, not God's vision of the future, is through this psychological mechanism known as predictive programming. Now, this has been going on for really endless amounts of years. But again, with the advent of computer technology, search engine technology, etc., it has accelerated. In terms of myself, just being an individual, and you probably share this experience yourself, I noticed a marked increase in this kind of thing that began in 2016 when Donald Trump was beginning to run for the political office of President of the United States. I noticed a marked change, a marked transformation in intertechnology. And the first thing I noticed, because I in the writing of the books that I write, the first thing that I noticed, because I spend so much time researching stuff on the internet, was that it had become harder and harder and harder in a very short period of time to get legitimate information on a whole range of topics. Now, let me specify what I mean by that. You can always look up information on topics, and depending upon whatever search engine you use, a whole bunch of pictures or a whole bunch of articles or headlines will spill out, and then you can choose which article you want to read or whatever. But being a researcher and being somebody who scrutinizes what he researches, being somebody who filters out the baloney, if you will, and looks for the truth, I began to notice that, let's say 5 years ago, I could type in a word. Let's just take a word such as the word fluoride, referring to the chemical that is in a lot of toothpaste brands and mouthwashes and drinking water and stuff. Now, I'm using that word intentionally because even though there is no question that fluoride is an ingredient in toothpaste and mouthwash and many other products, nobody's arguing that fluoride is non-existent. What the argument is concerning what the mainstream media have decided to call, quote, a conspiracy theory. So according to the mainstream media, there is a conspiracy theory that fluoride has been put in the drinking water and toothpaste and other items that we consume as human beings, including our drinking water, tap water, bottled water, etc. And according to the mainstream media, the idea that this was done as a conspiracy to harm or impact the consciousness or the brains or the thinking or the emotions of people who drink this water or use this toothpaste, that is labeled officially as a conspiracy theory by the so-called experts. Now, when I say the so-called experts, I'm really talking about the pseudo-experts, or what could be called the fake experts, or what could be called the fake news experts. Because the reality of the matter is, it's not a debate. It's not scientifically debatable to debate whether or not the substance fluoride alters the consciousness, thinking power, brains, and emotions of human beings. That really shouldn't be a matter of debate in the sense of whether it does it or not. Perhaps you could debate to what degree it does it. But to dismiss it as a conspiracy theory is a classic example of fake news. Now, that's not my opinion versus somebody else's opinion. That simply happens to be factual. In other words, if you did research on the subject, unbiased research, these are the facts that you would discover for yourself. Now, I began to notice that, especially around 2016, when Donald Trump began to enter the election, there were radical changes going on in the way that the search engines worked and the internet worked, and I didn't notice a whole lot of people talking about it back then. But I was acutely aware of it because I spent so many hours a day researching. And again, just to arbitrarily use a term like fluoride, I'm using this term because it illustrates the larger problem. So if I was to type in the term fluoride today, what I would get primarily is what we call a series of mainstream media articles or mainstream media experts who would either not acknowledge that there's a problem with fluoride at all, or label the concern over the chemical fluoride as being paranoia or a conspiracy theory, or at the very least significantly downplay it. And you could go, let's say, 30 pages, 35 pages deep into a search engine, and just about every article that you would pull up would have the same point of view or the same tone to it. Versus if you went back 3, 4, 5, 6 years or more ago on the internet, you would see on the very first pages of your internet search on fluoride, you would see articles written by reputable scientists, think tanks, laboratories, etc., giving you all kinds of credible research and information about what they consider to be the potential dangers of people ingesting the dangerous chemical fluoride. It would be right there on the first page of your internet search. It would be prominent within the first 35 pages. But now the entire landscape of the internet has been subtly and socially re-engineered. And you find it next to impossible to find serious articles and research that would open the door to the question, is fluoride harmful to you? Does it have any mind-altering effects? Now, that's just one word. That's just one word. But you multiply that by 1,000,000 words, and all of a sudden, like a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse, you've wiped out the existence and the reality of all kinds of thought, all kinds of history, all kinds of information, which gives the person researching a highly distorted view of what reality is. Because you're not acknowledging a very important scientific fact, but a very important scientific fact which, if you do the research on it, opens the door to other very important scientific facts. So, as somebody who's spent a lifetime researching things that the mainstream attempts to discredit, I've discovered a principle, and it's like going back to this analogy of connecting the dots. It's like looking at a giant wall with all kinds of black dots on it, which appear to be meaningless in their shape. Okay, it appears to be random in their shape. But if you know how to connect the dots then, especially if you connect the dots by drawing lines from one dot to another, the dots then become very meaningful shapes, perhaps words, perhaps symbols, which no longer remain mysterious, but they now contain very powerful and insightful information. So what at first appears to be random dots that doesn't have any real meaning and suggests that you shouldn't pay attention to it, suddenly when you begin to connect these so-called random dots, you now have shapes, forms, words, which is giving you a tremendous amount of information and opening all kinds of doors that you didn't know existed in terms of research, history, and science that's real and viable and really helps you understand your world and what is going on in your world. It requires a little work, but the work is well worth it. And you will find that researching so many esoteric subjects, like the subject of fluoride in and of itself, it just happens to be one of those key words that when you unlock the door to the meaning of fluoride, it leads to so many other things. So, for example, I'm not going to name the name of the search engine. You can guess the name. It's the largest search engine in the world. So I typed in the word fluoride. And what I'm getting the opposite of what I used to get. I am basically getting what you would call mainstream news information about fluoride, which is basically telling me nothing. It's talking to me in traditional language about fluoride some studies show that fluoride may reduce cavities, some studies show that fluoride may not reduce cavities, and it doesn't take it any deeper than that. Now, because it doesn't take it any deeper than that, it's ignoring the elephant in the middle of the living room. Well, let me say that again. Because the world's most powerful search engine, when I type in the word fluoride, the very first article that comes up basically tells me nothing. it's giving me disinformation, because the research on fluoride, whether you agree with it or not, is huge. So why is the very first article, who chose, and I don't think it was a group of people sitting around in a committee meeting, I think it was done by a computer robot or an algorithm. They deliberately decide to place up in their news list on the first page of the search engine, in the first inquiry of the search engine, a kind of neutral, lukewarm article that doesn't really give you any information, so that you discourage the average, normal user of the internet who's lazy intellectually, who won't think, who has no perseverance, and will say, oh, I looked it up, and not even bother to look up other references on fluoride. And so you give a dumbed-down explanation. And then, this is interesting, at least it's semi-honest, on the second page of fluoride, there happens to be an article written by a alternative medical doctor who has a good reputation, who tells a great deal of truth. And all of a sudden, in the second article, you discover that by this well-known alternative doctor, you discover that there's a whole bunch of court cases on fluoride that could potentially end water fluoridation in the United States of America, and that fluoride is potentially dangerous, can destroy your health and destroy your mind, can make you dumber, stupider. It can be one of the contributing factors to Alzheimer's and dementia, and all the lawsuits going on that show that fluoride produces neurotoxicity. Now, the reason you even see this much honesty here in this particular topic is because actually this particular topic of fluoride is not like necessarily a political issue, and it is an issue that concerns people who are liberal and conservative. Nobody wants to poison their kids, and nobody wants to poison themselves. So because of the new and growing interest in the toxic attributes of fluoride, it is posted up high on the search engine list. And you see the dangers in a series of articles on fluoride being put in the drinking water and being used by dentists and being used in water that the average person drinks. I'm just spontaneously reading some of the sub-articles from this doctor. Maternal fluoride exposure during pregnancy correlates to lower IQ in their children. So in this article, which is very recent, there's a scientific study which says that mothers who use fluoride products, that would be mouthwashes and bottled water and drinking water and water and coffee and tea and soda and toothpaste and stuff, it says that mothers who put that kind of fluoride in their bodies while they're pregnant, they lower the IQ in their children. Now think about this. Think about how many dumbed-down Americans there are. And they don't even bother to do the basic research here. And they're drinking and consuming products and waters and stuff that contain fluoride. And now there's a growing number of scientific studies which say that the consumption of fluoride causes your baby to have a far lower IQ. I mean, that should be of huge interest to a mother. Now, now there's a bunch of serious lawsuits and studies of how fluoride lowers a person's IQ. So, because this is not necessarily a political topic, but a topic that is of interest to liberals and conservatives, we discover that, well, there's a lot of interest in fluoride. And so what I would have read 2 or 3 years ago, which would have all been basically positive stuff about fluoride, now we find out there's some dangers. But still, the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest news story of all is completely absent from the front page of the largest search engine in the world. And that news story is, who is it? What organization, what nation, what group, what individual, who decided to put large amounts of fluoride in the water drinking supply to begin with? What was the rationale or the reason for using and consuming fluoride to begin with? Who made the decision to do this? And then there's still propaganda articles, which are just flat out lying, saying, is fluoride actually good for people? Yeah, that's like saying, is rat poison good for people? Is rat poison good for people? But still, there's no research. There's no articles. Now I'm on page 2 that tell the real story of fluoride. Now I'm on page 2. Now I'm just going to randomly jump to page 8 to see as we go deeper. And now I see, wow, more propaganda, in which this is propaganda from all these major cities, utilities companies, that say fluoride is an abundant, naturally occurring element found in rock, soil, and fresh ocean water, so that it's okay. Fluoride is safe. This is according to the Utah Department of Health. Okay. And it says, my water's fluoride, I guess the question is my water's fluoride safe? Is it an effective prevention of tooth decay for people of all ages? Know if your water is optimally fluoridated. Now, there are so many health departments, and there's so many states listed on the map, and it says, statements from leading medical voices, water fluoride maps and charts. But the point is that there's a cover-up going on here. Okay, a cover-up of the real story. Because here we are 8 pages deep. Now, I'm going to just experiment. I'm doing this very quickly. Normally I would do this would take me hours. So, it's a city after city, state after state in the United States. Some states where people are smarter than other states, like Portland, Oregon, rejects adding fluoride to drinking water. That's because somebody has some brains in Portland, Oregon. So, now you could go 35 pages easily, and it's all going to be innocuous. There's no real danger here, ho-hum. See, that's a rigged search engine, because it's not a tiny fringe group of people that are interested in the safety of fluoride. There's a growing number of people who are educated and aware of the dangers of fluoride. And if this search engine was really not a rigged algorithm, it would be posting hundreds of articles in the first 35 pages, at least discussing the dangers of fluoride. So now I'm gonna click a subtopic called fluoride conspiracy, just to see what it says. And it talks about the communist conspiracy of fluoride. And then here's another article. And now, so who do they use to do the stories that suggest there's a conspiracy to get the people to drink fluoride? They use very non-credible internet news sources that are sensationalistic and have no credibility. They use the sensationalistic, non-credible news sources to promote the idea that fluoride's just fine. And then you have mainstream magazines. Here's Forbes magazine, supposedly very respectable financial magazine. Forbes, supposedly former conservative political candidate. And the title of the article in Forbes magazine, a allegedly respectable magazine, is entitled "Why You Still Shouldn't Worry About Fluoridated Drinking Water." And it says that the fears about fluoridated drinking water are exaggerated. There's no harmful effects given the doses of fluoride in drinking water or swimming pools. Past and present fears are exaggerated. And basically, there's no basis for concern about the dangers of fluoride. Now, to the official moron out there, and I don't mean to be kind in saying that, but you see, people who don't know how to research are morons. I'm not trying to be rude, really. It's just that they're morons because they take things at face value. And you say, well, how can you be a Christian and call somebody a moron? Well, I think that deserves an answer. So before I proceed here, I'm going to read you something from the book of Proverbs and explain to you on what basis I could be a Christian and call somebody a moron. Because you see, when somebody refuses to pursue wisdom, when somebody refuses to gain wisdom, acquire wisdom, they're violating a very basic biblical rule, especially outlined in detail in the book of Proverbs. And because they refuse to be diligent in applying themselves to the gaining of wisdom, they become dumbed down and stupid and reap the consequences because they're violating God's principles. So, you could attempt to make the case that I'm being rude by saying people are a moron if they accept things at face value. Or if you read the book of Proverbs, I would just challenge you to rethink your assessment that's unkind to call somebody a moron based on what the book of Proverbs says. Because if it goes back to this question, if you love your neighbor as yourself, or if you're going to do what Jesus would do, and remember what Jesus said the penalty would be if we caused any of these little children to stumble. And causing little children to stumble is allowing them as adults to be exposed to neurotoxins and poisons that can seriously damage their IQ and make them stupid when they don't have to be. That would be causing them to stumble. And Jesus said it would be better for that person that a millstone would be tied around their neck and they would be thrown into the sea and drowned. Because what you're doing is enormous potential damage to a child because you refused to spend a little effort to do a little homework about fluoride. Okay, we're going to get into this in a moment. And you're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. We have tons of free articles for you. We have the Paul McGuire Ministries Roku Channel. We have videos, conferences, all kinds of stuff for you to read for free. And we have books available to help educate you in all kinds of areas. So we'll be back in just a second. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Okay, so I asked the question, or I raised the hypothetical question of somebody challenging me, how can you call yourself a Christian and call somebody a moron? And I think that deserves an answer. Now, the Word of God from Genesis to Revelation is filled with God telling us to acquire knowledge and seek His face for wisdom. The book of Proverbs is one book among many sources in the Bible that tells us over and over again the importance, the priority, and I'm just going to read some of the verses. Proverbs chapter 1, starting at verse 2. To know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom. A wise man will hear and increase learning. A man of understanding will attain wise counsel. So there's this constant exhortation by God in His Word for us not to accept the status quo, but God is continually imploring us, exhorting us, challenging us, and in fact commanding us over and over again in His Word, specifically Proverbs and other chapters in the Bible and books in the Bible, to get wisdom, to get instruction, to get knowledge. And He does it so repetitively, you realize that God is speaking to us with an urgency. Here's the overall principle. Proverbs chapter 2, starting at verse 20. Wisdom calls aloud outside. That means all wisdom is not contained just in the Word of God or just in a synagogue or just in a church. Wisdom is wherever God speaks to us, even if God uses, in real life, bad examples of what happens to people who depart from the wisdom of God. And it says, wisdom calls aloud outside. She raises her voice in the open squares. She speaks her words. How long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? Now, the term, and here wisdom is referred to as a woman. When it says, how long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity, there is an insult in that term. It's referring to, a simple one is like synonymous with saying, how long, you stupid ones, will you be content with being stupid? That would be a modern translation of the book of Proverbs, by the way. So it's only somebody who doesn't read the Bible would challenge me and say, how can you be a Christian and call somebody a moron? Because the Word of God uses the same confrontational language. How long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? Simplicity and simple ones would be calling somebody a moron would be the modern equivalent of saying a simple one or being stupid. And then God says that we're supposed to turn to His rebuke and His correction. And the warning that only fools hate knowledge. So you see, if I'm trying to give somebody knowledge, the knowledge of a toxic chemical, a neurotoxin, that could give brain damage to their child, and I'm trying to tell them to not use substances, even if it's drinking water or whatever, that would pass on a toxin to your child, and you scorn at what I'm trying to communicate to you, even though I've done my homework. The Word says, for scorners delight in their scorning. and fools hate knowledge. So what God is saying in his word is that the person who does not want to hear the knowledge that could help them, the person that's scorning the knowledge that could help them, especially in matters like fluoride or whatever it happens to be, according to God's word, they are a fool. So again, you can ask me the question, how can you call yourself a Christian and call someone a moron? Well, God calls them fools. Simple ones, which would be the equivalent of a moron. So if you read God's word, you see that God is confrontational because true love is confrontational. Only counterfeit love is not confrontational. Because you disdained all of my counsel. Now see, I'm trying to give counsel because in a moment I'm going to provide you with scientific facts to back up what I'm telling you. But it says, but because you disdained all my counsel and would have none of my rebuke, I will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your terror comes. There's a price to be paid. God is not a sadist. He doesn't want to laugh and mock. And then there's this constant crying out from the Lord throughout the Bible, especially in Proverbs, the value of wisdom. My son, if you receive my words and treasure my commands within you, so that you incline your ear to wisdom and apply your heart to understanding. Yes, if you cry out for discernment, lift up your voice as for understanding. If you seek for her as silver and search for her as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God, for the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on, where the Holy Spirit, speaking through the Word of God, is telling us to acquire wisdom and to get wisdom in every area of life, not just the so-called spiritual areas. A case in point would be the notes that I was given the job of writing all the notes from Genesis to Revelation, all the word wealth notes and all the word definition notes. And in this printed Bible, it says, expand your mind. This is something I wrote, published in the Bible, where I talk about a African-American scientist named George Washington Carver who asked God in prayer to unlock the secrets of a peanut. And God gave Mr. Carver so much knowledge about a single peanut that numerous inventions and industries sprang up from this single prayer. So you see, God gives scientific revelation too if we seek him. And on and on and on, there's this unending appeal from God to us if we read his word to acquire knowledge and wisdom, so we can be blessed and not suffer unnecessarily. So that answers the question, by the way, if somebody says, well, how can you call yourself a Christian and then call someone a moron? Because there's numerous examples in the Bible where God refers to people as being morons or stupid, because that's simply modern translations of what was intended to mean the exact same thing with equal bluntness in the King James language. Okay, so let's get back to the facts and the science that should not be ignored, and the hiding of truth. Why would the internet and so many search engines that are owned by the globalist elite hide the truth from you? What's the agenda? They want a compliant, non-thinking, slave-like population. And one of the ways you do that's why Forbes magazine is telling you, you shouldn't worry about fluoridated drinking water. I'll be very blunt. Fluoridated drinking water was first put into the water supply. The first example in history where extra doses of fluoride was added to the drinking water was ordered by Adolf Hitler the head of Nazi Germany, to make the population dumbed down and compliant so he could control them and more effectively rule them as a dictator. That's a historical and scientific fact. I'm going to give you the proof of that in a moment. That's a fact. So, would you trust a magazine? I don't care how respected it is, Forbes magazine, where it says why you still shouldn't worry about fluoridated drinking water? Somebody's lying to you. Either I'm lying to you, or this magazine is lying to you. You're going to have to make a decision. And the only way you can make that decision is to do more research. Because that's the price of protecting your mind and your kids' minds. Now, fact-checked. I really believe in fact checks. So like for 1 second, I'm laughing because the fact check lies. Fact check: water fluoridation reduces IQ? ? Okay, let's see what fact check says. See, this tells you why fact checking is George Orwell. It's propaganda. It's lies. From Snopes.com. Does water fluoridation reduce IQ? Studies suggesting a link between public water fluoridation and reduced intelligence rely on unsubstantiated leaps made possible by studies of insufficient quality that were conducted to address entirely different questions. I've changed everything that I said. Everything that I said, I'm going to change because a fact check came up in my computer regarding this question, and I'm using a very large search engine company, and according to the official fact checkers, there's no studies that show that fluoridated water reduces IQ. See, the whole fact check thing is a rigged thing designed to perpetuate lies. Water fluoridation reduces IQ. Oh, I guess I'm safe. See, this is how stupid people think, by the way. Claim: scientific studies demonstrate that the process of adding fluoride to public water reduces the IQ of individuals in those areas. Here's the fact check. False in big red letters. Beginning in the mid-1940s, cities in the United States began adding low concentrations of fluoride to public water supplies in an effort to prevent tooth decay. 74.4% of the United States population has access to water from fluoridated sources. According to numerous meta-studies, the addition of fluoride from the ionic form of the element fluorine, what does it say? Significantly reduces the incidence of dental cavities. Oh, and then to show you the audacity of this fake fact-checking company, they attack the doctor who was honest, Dr. Marcola. They attacked him for being honest. They attack Alex Jones for being honest. And then they tell you that, well, there's no danger at all. So, if you're a moron, you're going to accept what you're told. And if you are intelligent, you're going to use multiple resources, multiple studies, and you're going to do a comparative study because you want the truth. Don't take it from me. Don't believe me. Do a comparative study. This is interesting that I typed in fluoride of all the words to type in because it's such a great illustration of how people will lie to you. So in my book, Conquering the Matrix, and I was aware of this for a while, but in my book, Conquering the Matrix, which talks about how to know if you're under scientific mind control, how to break scientific mind control, and then linking it to Bible prophecy. In my book, Conquering the Matrix, I talk about the different methodologies being used to brainwash people, and one is to deliberately dumb them down scientifically. That's what Aldous Huxley talked about. And one of the ways you dumb people down scientifically is you contaminate their food supply, you contaminate their water supply, and according to numerous scientific studies, fluoride, when you put it in drinking water and other things your body absorbs, like toothpaste, etc., produces a specific scientific result. So let's look up, and I'm using my book, Conquering the Matrix, as a source. You can get this book, and you should get it, at paulmcguire.us, and I'm looking for the chapters I did on fluoride. Oh, here we go. From my book, Conquering the Matrix. Chapter 30, The Global Threat of Fluoride and Aluminum. Okay, so in this book, I spend the first part of the chapter warning that two of the most toxic substances that all of us are being exposed to is aluminum and fluoride, because they're contaminants which affect the brain. Aluminum and fluoride can cause Alzheimer's, dementia, and all kinds of brain problems that are very, very severe. Now, that's a scientific fact, and I have my source here that you can look up, because the source has chart after chart after chart where you can decide for yourself. And then I talk about the effect of fluoride on human consciousness. And here's a quote from a researcher who wrote How Fluoride Affects Consciousness and the Will to Act. Now, of course Hitler would be interested in a chemical called fluoride, which affects human consciousness and prohibits the will to act. And then what it says is that fluoride in children and infected mothers was linked to brain disorders and lower IQs in their children. In many cases, the changes triggered can be permanent. Only 7 countries in the world actually fluoridate. Now, look, this is just common sense, okay? This is common sense. You don't have to be Albert Einstein to figure this out. Obviously, there is something highly dangerous in the chemical fluoride. There's something highly dangerous in relationship to its effect on the human brain if only 7 countries in the world actually fluoridate their water supply. That means that 93% of all the nations in the world do not fluoridate their water supply, and only 7% of the nations in the world do fluoridate their water, like the United States. Now, from my book, Conquering the Matrix, I have a subchapter called The First Nation in History to Use Fluoride in Water Was Nazi Germany. And this is a historical fact, okay? So, according to historical records, and I did a lot of research on this, the first time in history sodium fluoride was put into drinking water took place in the German ghettos in the 1930s and 1940s. And then it was heavily used in the Nazi concentration camps. And then I asked the question in my book, what was the real reason the Nazis put fluoride in the drinking water to prevent cavities? What was the real reason the Nazis put fluoride in the drinking water to prevent cavities? ? In the late 1930s, they started to put fluoride in water supply of American cities to prevent tooth decay and cavities. At the end of World War II, Charles Eliot Perkins, a researcher in chemistry, biochemistry, physiology, and pathology, was sent to Germany to oversee their chemical plants. He published a report of the German water supply plants. Because as he was going all over Germany and the surrounding nations and inspecting the German water supply plants, he noticed, as he was analyzing, as he was hired to do, he noticed that in the chemical composition of the drinking water supply in Germany, there was a much higher percentage of fluoride than there should have been. And he knew that it was being put in there on purpose, and he was trying to figure out why, because at that time most people didn't know what fluoride did. And this is his statement that he wrote in his report. The real purpose behind water fluoridation is to reduce the resistance of the masses to domination and control and loss of liberty. Repeated doses of infinitesimal amounts of fluorine will, in time, gradually reduce the individual's power to resist domination by slowly poisoning and narcotizing this area of the brain tissue and make him or her submissive to the will of those who wish to govern him. Wow. Now, if you think that's like freaky and weird, it fits in with all the research that I've been giving you about Aldous Huxley and the scientific dictatorship, where Huxley says they'll use drugs and scientific mind control to program people into being slaves, and they won't even know that they're slaves. I have that and those quotes in my book, Mass Awakening. And I have additional quotes in my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America. So if you get these three books, Conquering the Matrix, Mass Awakening, and A Prophecy of the Future of America, you'll see the detailed plan and the exact quotes from the scientists who did these things, and you will have the solid scientific proof and easy-to-read language that you need to intelligently communicate to people. Sodium, now this is back, I'm reading from Conquering the Matrix, available at paulmcguire.us. Okay, so it says, I said, sodium fluoride in the water supply affects our bodies and minds. Sodium fluoride calcifies the pineal gland. British scientist Jennifer Luke published a study which found that fluoride deposits tended to accumulate in the pineal gland and calcify it. In addition, a 450-page review of fluoride toxicity published by the National Research Council in 2006 reported that fluoride produced a range of negative side effects, including decreased melatonin production and other effects on normal pineal function, which in turn could contribute to a variety of effects in human beings. And then I give you the quotes, the studies, the articles. And some of these studies, by the way, come from the School of Biological Sciences, University of Surrey, Guildford, Great Britain, and are medical research papers. So we have proof that fluoride, by the way, there isn't just one study, or two studies, or three studies. There's thousands of studies that prove that fluoride is a neurotoxin. And the bottom line is, see, it's not like you have a glass of water and you wake up dumb in the morning. It incrementally, over a period of time, shuts down the brain, makes you more compliant, reduces your IQ. So if you're a mom or a grandmom or whatever, and I'm going to be blunt because I want to use a little shock effect here, and you want to raise a kid and make sure that kid is stupid and can't fulfill his or her true potential, then you keep giving them sodas and waters and toothpaste and other stuff and fluoridated products. And it's not going to happen overnight, but over 10, 20, 30 years of time, you'll dumb them down. Now, a word of advice to you. Knowledge is power. When you learn something like this, I would strongly suggest that you don't go running around telling everybody you know. Because when you do, all you know what is going to break loose. You're going to be challenged, and unless you've really done your homework, you're not going to be able to take the heat of the challenge. People are going to go nuts on you because you're threatening one of their sacred cows. So I would suggest that you keep your mouth, your lips sealed, and speak very cautiously until you have learned enough about the subject, until you've educated yourself enough about the subject, and then speak very wisely and don't speak often. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because you are challenging, you are essentially saying the emperor has no clothes. People don't like it. Number two is you're like the kid saying, not the kid, but it's the kid that said the emperor has no clothes. You're like somebody saying there's an elephant in the living room. People don't like it. You need to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. People are going to try to marginalize you and label you as a conspiracy theory nut if you go around talking about this. So you need to be very wise. When I first did my research on the scientific studies of this, and by the way, I was surprised what I found out. I wasn't surprised at all to find out that fluoride dumbs you down. That didn't surprise me. But I must confess to you that I was surprised that the first historical case of fluoride being put into the drinking water in large amounts occurred in Nazi Germany under the dictator Adolf Hitler. I was surprised. I mean, I was both surprised and not surprised. So, because I've written 31 books and I speak out, I was talking to a particular medical expert who I have, trying not to reveal the source, but who I talk to every once in a while. So I tested the water and simply, innocently asked the question, well, what do you think about fluoride? Do you think fluoride, I played dumb. But what do you think about fluoride? Do you think fluoride has any harmful effects? Now, this qualified medical professional, and I'm not impugning his medical professionalism or his training, because in his area specifically, he has a reputation of being very good at what he does. But I must tell you, because I knew he was a Christian, that I was shocked that he knew nothing of the history of fluoride. I mean, I can see if he did his research and said, Paul, I don't agree with you. Here's all the reasons why I don't agree with you. But he didn't know the facts and the history behind fluoride. So he just gave me the official commercial, answer, which is, it prevents cavities, which, by the way, is seriously in question. He knew nothing about fluoride's neurotoxic capabilities to dumb down human consciousness in the brain. He knew nothing. And by the way, once I gave him a test question. I floated it out there very subtly. And once I realized he knew absolutely nothing about it, besides the fact that he was practicing in the medical field, where I'm sure this was brought up to him for 40 years at least. Once I realized he knew nothing about the subject, I very delicately backed off, because you must choose your timing on these things. You have to. But I'm not afraid of confronting somebody. I'm not afraid of getting into a debate. But you have to choose your timing. And then you have to ask yourself the question, is this individual, they may be great people, but is this individual really hungry for the truth? And it was my assessment, I could be wrong, that this individual was not hungry for the truth, didn't really want me to bring it up, probably had been challenged multiple times before, but never bothered to do his own homework. So I didn't back off out of fear. I backed off out of strategy, and I suggest the same thing for you. You have to be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. Because you see, I tried to imagine if I was him. First of all, this is sad, but this is human nature. He makes a very affluent living practicing the kind of medicine he practices. It's going to rock his boat, okay? If he willingly knows that a substance he's giving is potentially toxic, well, there's all kinds of legal problems, okay? So part of him doesn't want to know, okay? Number two is, it would put him at odds with all his colleagues, with the people in his profession. It would potentially make him an oddball. There's a real price for him to pay, economically and socially. Many of you may say, well, he should just pay it. Well, that may be true, but people are people. So you have to think out what you're going to say, and most importantly, what you're not going to say, by using your critical thinking skills. Just because you know the truth doesn't mean it's always advisable to share that truth at that particular moment. You need to pray. You need to really know your stuff in case you're challenged, which means you've got to educate yourself. But then you need to be careful and speak wisely and choose your words wisely. Because you can't just I'm sharing this from firsthand experience because I've learned the hard way and the easy way and every other way, and when you're trying to tell people who basically are in a fog and you're waking them up for the first time, and they work in a career where they're using fluoride related products all the time, and you, I'm speaking of myself, don't have a medical degree in the same area that this individual has, they're going to assume you don't know anything. And I certainly don't pretend to be a medical doctor. And I would say to you in this program, I am not a medical doctor. I am not giving you medical advice. You need to find a trusted physician, doctor, dentist, or whatever, and seek qualified medical advice. I'm not a medical doctor. But when I find out that certain things are not good for me, and you shouldn't be doing what I tell you to do just because I'm telling you to do it. You need to do it based on your own convictions and research. You need to be wise about how you handle the truth and information. And that's a friendly, kind of encouraging reminder when you know the truth. Because truth is very powerful. It's very powerful. Now, why did I bring this up? Well, it's just one component. It's one component of what happens when you live in a society which has drifted away spiritually so far from God that people no longer have the ability to think critically and rationally, and it shows up every day in life. When you hear, people on television, who's credible, who's lying, this comes into play every day. And the way that you process information, the way that you know who's lying and who's telling the truth is by growing your God-given abilities to use your intelligence and perception, your critical thinking, through prayer and the Holy Spirit, and through renewing your mind with the Word of God. It has an accumulative effect. Now, here's the good news. Yes, this substance and many other substances are neurotoxins, but they can be removed from the body naturally. And I don't want to get into it, and you shouldn't just jump off the gangplank and embark on some radical program that could hurt your health. But you can reverse, and you can do things nutritionally, and with God's help and prayer and other things to reboot your God-given brain power and your immune system and your health. There's so many things you can do. I want to get into that in another program. Anyway, we have a Paradise Mountain Church service coming up very soon, and you can get the date by going to paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. It's coming up in October at the Sportsman's Lodge. The Lord's given me a powerful message to share with you. There'll be a time of prayer, and I believe you'll be encouraged, and the Lord will move mightily. And again, I would love to see you there. And anyone who needs prayer, we always make ourselves available to pray. I make myself available personally to pray for anyone who comes. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire, and we'll see you on the next edition of the Paul McGuire Report.
McGuire Report, with a message to exhort. It's the Paul McGuire Report.